We are heading into week 7, Tyler, and obviously there's a lot to talk about. This has been an interesting fantasy year. I feel like we say that every single year. There's some kind of like caveat to the season, but one of the main storylines in real football, Tyler, is with the Jets. Man, they've had a lot of dysfunction here, and we just had Robert Saleh get fired. There's a lot of changes here, and the biggest change has happened yet for this season. Davante Adams is now on the New York Jets, so obviously, after a tough loss on Monday night, they had to make some changes, felt it was time. And Davante Adams, who had his time in with the Raiders, even though it was short, has now moved on teams. This is something we've been feeling it's coming along here. But I think for fantasy, one of the biggest questions here is like, how do we handle this situation? We got a wide receiver one, bona fide wide receiver one in Garrett Wilson, who was just starting to look like he was getting more targets. Now you bring in another bona fide wide receiver one who's been that for years. How are you feeling about this situation? Because this kind of feels like it could be one of those, 1A, 1B situations we've been seeing all over the place this year in fantasy.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. I've seen people say like Garrett Wilson's dead. I don't think Garrett Wilson is dead. Now, for me personally, I was drafting. I thought Garrett Wilson, I had him as wide receiver 5 heading into the season. I thought he was going to be a stud, and it was looking like may come to fruition after the past couple of weeks. But now, it's safe to say he's not going to be a top 5 wide receiver. Now, do I think because the biggest question is where do you think these guys kind of end up? Because I look at Garrett Wilson and I'm a big believer in target share. I think target share shows that wide receivers are good. Garrett Wilson this year, first in targets. I want to see he has over 60 targets. No other wide receiver has 60 targets this year. So way ahead of the pack. Yeah, he's at 66. Next
You get
closest
30
is
in the last 2 games. That'll do that.
yeah, Drake London's next, 54.
Ooh.
What a beast. And then your boy Wandell's after him. But so Drake
Wandell 60 targets for 400 yards.
for 400, he probably has like 200.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? But anyways, so Garrett Wilson, I think he's, a very good real life wide receiver. And I think he's now like, you could argue the best number 2 wide receiver. Although I wouldn't even say he's like truly a number 2. I would truly say it's a 1A, 1B. And I also look at the situation where I think we've seen, Jalen Hurts support Devontae Smith and AJ Brown be top 12 wide receivers. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, top 12 wide receivers. Even T. Higgins, I don't think that T. Higgins, Jamar Chase both finished as top 12. It was top 12 in terms of points per game because I think T got hurt and missed some time that year. But we've seen 2 guys on an offense be top 12. Now, I think that Drake London, or I think Garrett Wilson at worst, in my opinion, is a wide receiver 2. I think that he can finish as a high-end wide receiver 2, even a back-end wide receiver 1. I think it's going to be very close in terms of targets between these two, and maybe the slight edge to Davante because he's Davante and he's played with Aaron Rodgers before. But I don't think that these guys are dead. And the other thing, too, is I just think this offense becomes very consolidated, where it's going to be 2 guys with Breece Hall. That's what this offense is going to be moving forward. I think there's, Alan Lazard's been a top 10 wide receiver this year. I think it kills Alan Lazard. Mike Williams done. If you had any hopes for like a guy like Tyler Conklin being a decent tight end this year, that's out the window. So I don't think this kills Garrett Wilson. I think he's, obviously not going to be a high-end wide receiver 1, but could be a back-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. I think that he'll be okay.
What's funny is I think we get, the fantasy community especially gets stuck in like, is this guy top 12? Is he top 10? Is he a wide receiver 2? Is he a wide receiver 3? We get stuck so much in rankings that we forget like there's talent too. Like there's talent in the league. The difference between being number 12 in a ranking and number 15 in a ranking shouldn't mean wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams will both be wide receiver 1 on a weekly basis. Now, if we're ranking them at number 10 for the week versus number 15 for the week, who knows? But both of these guys are elite for a reason. And we talk about 1A, 1B. We are seeing it all over the league right now. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, both of these receivers are doing well. Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, both of these receivers are doing good. Like, we can go through the teams and talk about, even on the Jets, we have Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard, 2 top 10 receivers there on the same team. So to say that like one of these guys has to suffer because another one is coming into the picture it's not fair to me. I do think it caps the ceiling, right? We're not going to see Davante Adams be a top 5 guy. I don't think we'll see Garrett Wilson be a top 5 guy. Or if they are, it will just be at a more inconsistent rate than what we want as fantasy managers. So To me, both of these guys have elite wide receiver one capabilities when you pair them
Mhm.
with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. So to say Garrett Wilson's done when he's going to be going up against number two corners a lot of times,
Yeah.
or maybe the team does that with Davante Adams, or maybe these teams switch depending on who's hot. Like I just don't see a world where both of these guys aren't effective in their roles and still wide receiver one capable on any given week.
And I would even argue that I'd be buying Garrett Wilson. Like, I think a lot of people are honestly panicking about Garrett Wilson because they look at the situation and say, "Oh, he's toast." Like you said, I don't think he's toast. I think they'll both be fine. These are once again elite guys who, when elite players have good quarterback play, which Aaron Rodgers hasn't been great this year, but he hasn't been bad by any means. These guys come out and they show up. So I would be honestly buying Garrett Wilson because I think that some managers are probably panicking. Now, I
You got
wouldn't
to
be
buy
buying
this whole
Devontae.
offense. Like you got to buy this whole
Yeah,
offense because Aaron Rodgers now his value goes up.
yeah,
There's no
for
other way to
sure,
frame
for
it. Like
sure.
we talked about how long it's been since he's had a 300-yard game or how he's not a 4,000-yard guy. It doesn't matter because the touchdowns are going to be there for him now. Breece Hall, now when this team has two respectable targets on the outside and Alan Lazard who's producing, you're going to see more lanes open up for Breece Hall. Like there's going to be opportunity for the stud pieces on this Jets team to be way more valuable than I think in our heads. You think you add a piece like Davante Adams and it hurts the offense. It's the same excitement and thing we're seeing play out right now with the Houston Texans when you bring in a Stephon Diggs. It just makes things easier for the entire
Mhm.
offense. So Aaron Rodgers to me I might have to bump him up a couple spots, Tyler.
No, I agree. And one other thing with Breece Hall too is, I mean, Breece Hall, big game last night, played 86% of the snaps. I mean, this is elite. And one other thing, like I think Davante Adams just makes this offense better, which I think may help Breece Hall kind of the most because I think that just means his touchdown totals can go up. Where more around the usage around the goal line. But I think all of them in general, but definitely Breece Hall, who, hey, Breece Hall and Bijan rebounded, huh? People
Yes.
were panicking. Obviously, like these guys are elite. They'll get going. But Breece Hall, I mean, looked great last night.
You know, the RB 6 and 7, not too bad considering the circumstances here. You know, everybody panicking on them. And here we are talking about our guys. So we took at number one, still the RB 6 and 7 in a negative light. I feel like, you know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? We doing pretty well. Breece Hall should be much better here. And like I said, I think for a guy who's pretty much known as a home run hitter and to see him play like a lot of the Braylon Allen stuff that even I was kind of concerned about. We had talked about this during the offseason. I was like, man, Braylon looks kind of good. To see him play like 80% of the snaps last night, it was like, nah, we're gonna feed our guy Breece and he's gonna be the engine that
And they
runs
had
this whole
that
thing.
the
So
change in play callers too, which I think could attribute to that. We'll see how it goes this week against Pittsburgh, but yeah, I mean, definitely a step in the right direction.
yeah, the Jets, man, this offense, you know, obviously a lot of changes recently with this Jets offense. It's good to